Good evening. I'm Dr. Basil Considine, and we are here today for conflict management analysis through dual theoretical lenses. This is our last live real-time webinar for the term, and we are going to be focusing in on a particular assignment from CONR 606, the final analysis, as it were. If you are not familiar with the Writing Center, we work with students at many different points in the processes through both one-on-one appointments, through webinars such as this, through just questions that people send us via email. All of these are fine. All of these services are free. We also have many resources, including links to all of our recordings that you can find in our website. Because it's the end of the term, we won't keep you too long. We're going to dive right in and let's talk about our main goals today. We're going to delve into the genre of the scholarly refutation, and we're going to look specifically at the instructions, the requirements, and expectations for CONR 606 Week 7 assignment, the final analysis, and then we're going to conclude with outlining and drafting. As is normal for one of our final webinars of the term, we'll try and get you out well in advance of the hour. But if you have questions, please feel free to ask us at any point, and although I might not get to your question right away, I will make sure to get it. And if you have a question that you're not comfortable asking openly in the chat, just send me a private message using the chat tool, and I'll be happy to answer it anyway. So let's talk about scholarly refutations. Well, first, what is a refutation? Well, if we went and looked in Merriam-Webster, we'd see refutation is the act or process of refuting. And that immediately leads to the question, well, what does it mean to refute something? Well, to refute is to prove wrong by argument or evidence, to show something to be false or erroneous, or ultimately to deny the truth or accuracy of something. Now, this is an important distinction because a lot of people focus on the first of these two definitions, which would be you're just proving that something is wrong. And while there are certainly some things where you can prove that one thing is or isn't another, oftentimes the boundaries are not that easy to discern, or it is a matter where there is a subjective element. For example, is something the best theory for understanding something is harder to prove than is it a useful theory for understanding this. So as we proceed with the assignment description, I want to recall that there are two different definitions for refute, and that you need to keep in mind that you will make an argument about what is the most appropriate theory for something, but your reader may disagree, and you might find things that have you yourself on the fence. So with that, let us look at what a scholarly refutation is. And sorry, that should be a scholarly refutation noun. A scholarly refutation is a counter-argument to something that is being presented. And that is more the sense that we're using it in this assignment. You will state a position that something is appropriate for a context, and you'll also give a refutation, a scholarly refutation, saying, well, and here are some reasons why it might not be the best or most appropriate. So with that, although it has become something of a fad to describe someone's refutation as crushing or winning or destroying the opposition, that's not necessarily the case, and we want to make a convincing argument, but ultimately there are some things that may be better for particular context, or we may disagree about what is the most helpful thing. And a common use of the word refute would be in a sentence like this: the defense attorney refuted the prosecutor's argument, but the jury still declared the defendant to be guilty. So this is an example of, well, the defense attorney gave a counter argument to what had been presented, but the jury didn't agree. They declared the defendant to be guilty. So also, because we're looking at a film which only shows you some things, and which of course has its own narrative that it was based on, a theory may not perfectly fit it. In fact, most of them probably won't. And that's something that is important because many things in life are that way, as is in conflict management. So, a scholarly refutation is used to critique a position. Critiques are not necessarily negative. You can civilly point out the pros and cons in something. And when you're refuting your own position, something that you've described, what this does is it shows that you have an understanding of those pros and cons and is a useful tool for demonstrating that you are making a well informed and balanced argument. And in this case, we're using a particular film as the catalyst for discussing competing theories. So, with that, let us turn and look at the assignment itself. So, this has a somewhat longer description, but in essence, it is uh, doing a couple core tasks. So, this is a final analysis assignment for CONR 606, and it asks you to analyze the movie Hidden Figures using two theories that have been studied in the course. You must use one communication theory and one social political theory for the analysis. In each, you should clearly demonstrate an understanding of all the tenets of your chosen theory as it relates to the given topic. So that's part one. Part two, after those two analyses, refute each one using a different theory that you've studied during this course. Each refutation should also demonstrate a complete understanding of the tenets of that theory and should be as thorough as the original analysis. So essentially, you're having a section where you say, okay, well, here's a communication theory that explains some stuff in the movie, a B section that has discussion of a social political theory that explains some things in the movie. And then you also have the counter, well, here's something that uh, might work better, and here's why. And doing that for both the communication theory and the social political theory. So if we view these as different topical sections, we have A, B, C, and D. And then there's a outline that's provided. These explicit instruction, set up your paper in this format. Introduction, what will the reader find in your paper? So that's saying make sure that you describe or outline the contents of the paper, that you list in the order that you discuss them, the things that will be found there. Then the body of the paper, that you'll have that analysis one and explanations of uh, what it is, summarizing, okay, who wrote it, when did they do that, what are the key points, the analysis of it using the theory being applied to some sort of character interaction in the movie. And it says any quotes included from the movie are properly cited, which suggests to me that we should probably be quoting at least a couple pieces of dialogue from the movie and just not simply describing, but also analyzing, assessing, interpreting the words that they say to each other. After that, you need to explain the weaknesses of the first theory and introduce another theory that might give an alternate view here or an alternate interpretation. And you're going to follow the same basic structure here. You're going to tell us about the theory, who wrote it, when was it published, what are the key points, and analyze things in the movie. And same thing, moving to social political and having two different theories that you introduced there, followed by your conclusion where you summarize your thoughts and support the positions you've created, and I think probably include a recommendation as well. All right, now there's some additional instructions here. Use headings for each section and label them like the bullet points above. All right, so that's telling you exactly the headings that you should have. There should be a body heading, conclusion heading, headings like analysis one, refutation one, explanation of the weaknesses. All right, so that's pretty basic. It tells you exactly what your heading should read like. There's a reminder here. Use communication theory to refute communication theory and social political theory to refute social political theory. Don't mix them up. That's actually a common mistake, so make sure you're doing that. And make sure that you have a total of 4 theories, no double dipping, and then some specifications here. Now, the main thing that I want to draw your attention to here in the specification is that 2,800 to 3,000 words thing. And a lot of students ask how long that is. Well, a paper written in APA with 12-point Times New Roman font, double spacing, 1-inch margins, all that normal stuff, will run around 250 words per page. So this is looking at 11 to 12 body pages in length. So that's not counting the references, that's not counting the title page, 11 to 12 pages of stuff. So these are going to be substantive analyses. It's not going to be one paragraph each. All right. And if we look at the rubric, we find that this is listing most of the things that are described in the instructions with a couple notable details. For example, you'll see that each section marked tenets of theory are used appropriately to analyze communication and interpersonal interaction in the film, that there are 30 points given to that, as opposed to 10 for the tenets of theory used appropriately to analyze communication and interpersonal interaction. So a lot of the credit is going to be going for that applying the theory. So in terms of proportion, we want to make sure that those tenets of theory are used appropriately to analyze communication and interpersonal interaction, that those sections are longer than the ones where you're just listing, here's what theory is, and here's what it states, or here's what it was developed for. You'll see that there is a note at the bottom. To get that full last 20 points, the paper must exceed basic writing standards, including grammar, usage, spelling, punctuation, organization. So that's the instructor's way of telling you this should be well polished, it should read and flow well. And if that's something that you need help, please feel free to make an appointment with the Writing Center, and we're happy to assist. Okay, continuing through here, let us now move to the outlining and drafting portion after visiting a couple key things. And if you're looking for a copy of the course paper template that you'll see me using, you can go ahead and download that right now. I'll go ahead and type a link in the chat room so you can grab that. Right. Now, I do want to call your attention to a note. So like the other sections, we've got a video for this module, and there's a note from the instruction. Remember that a refutation should point out the weaknesses of the first theory and argue for the superiority of the second. So don't just say, well, this one says these things and it's useful for that. Also tell us why this is better than the other one or more appropriate for the other one. And it may be something that seems more minor, but give us a good sell on the virtues. Some additional suggestions from me. Don't summarize or explain all events in the movie. And focus on events that are relevant to theories. Explain how a theory explains specific events, actions, and motivations. If you disagree with the theory's explanation, make a note as to why, and use that in your refutation section. Now let's take a look back at some of the theories studied. We've got a lot here. We've got uncertainty reduction, expectancy violations, cognitive dissonance, communication accommodation, social exchange, social penetration, communication privacy management, organizational cultural theory, muted group theory, media ecology. And then on the social political aspect, we have Marxist theory, feminist theory, and critical race theory. That's a fair bit. And while you have probably a very good understanding of the social political theories, since we just covered them in this class, there are a lot of other communication theories, and you might want to take a look back at your assignments for weeks 2 to 5 and see what theories did you use that you feel would be well used here as well, that you can apply and gain some additional insight. All right, so at this point, let's just cover one more thing, how to cite the film. This is another area where people often lose credit. And part of that is understanding the distinction between APA 6th edition, which required a bit more information, and APA 7th edition. So APA 6th edition, you might see the director's name and the cinematographer and the lead actors. And we've simplified that in APA 7. We just need the director's last name and initial, parentheses director, and then the standard information. The year it was released, title of film, that's Hidden Figures, have film in square brackets. And then this is a film that had multiple production houses working on it. Fox 2000 Pictures, Sherman Entertainment, Levantine Films. And if you're wondering why those aren't in alphabetical order, because that's the order that they're listed in the credits. Fox 2000 got first credit, so they're first on this list, just like in many journal articles, you have a first author, then the second author, and so forth. All right, let us go and take a look at that template now. Now, the first thing you'll want to do is to fill in your information here. Yeah, you can do that on your own. Just make sure you actually fill all these things in. Also, make sure you delete any of the comments here. I've seen a few drafts turned in that had these instructions left by mistake. So if you're familiar with the template especially, go ahead and use delete all comments in document, and then they're gone. Right, this assignment does not require an abstract, so we'll take that page out, and I'll just delete these placeholders here. And while you may, and almost certainly will be adding additional citations here, let me revise it. You will be adding additional citations here for whatever theories you choose. We know that you are going to be using things from the movie Hidden Figures because you're required to be citing it, and your instructor has strongly suggested that you be quoting from it because they gave you an instruction about doing that. All right, so we know the film is going to be here, and we'll just cite that as Melfi, 2016 when it comes up. And let's go ahead and look at the outlining. Now, this is an assignment that, again, gives you very specific instructions about what to do. In this case, it says to use the text from the outline in this paper. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to paste that information. This is the section in the instructions that says set up your paper in this format. Now, if we look at this, we see, okay, there are some things that we can immediately look at and add those headings. Let me just jump back to the page that we're looking at. So you can see this instruction in the first bullet. Use headings for each section and label them like the bullet points above, substituting the names of your chosen theories for the generic in each. All right, well, that's pretty straightforward, kind of refreshingly straightforward here. So first thing we're going to do, I'm going to start taking out these and putting in headings. Now, those of you who have been to a webinar with me before probably know that in APA style, we don't include a heading named introduction. So the very first section we understand is the introduction. It doesn't need a separate heading, should not have a separate heading. But the body of the paper, well, the instructions did say to include that. So let's go ahead and let's format it like the first heading in the paper because it is. And we're going to use that using the APA Level 1 style. You can pop out the styles pane here. And just select APA Level 1. There we go. And here, Analysis 1, Theory 1, well, that's going to be the next level. So APA Level 2. And I can go ahead and do that for these as well. When we get to conclusion, conclusion will also be an AP level 1 because it's the highest level that we might get, the same level as the body and the introduction, even though introduction doesn't have its own separate heading. So what about the other ones? Well, we need to have at least 2 headings at a particular level to use it in APA style. So you could have summary as one of the headings and analysis as the other, and weaknesses and strengths. Okay, that's fine. If you're going to do that, then I would say go ahead and add summary. Go ahead and format that. If it's a subheading of a level 2, that's going to be a level 3. And then here, also level 3. And then this here, this would be another one. And let's just take a look really quick. Let's say you decided you were going to use this specific text here as your heading. A couple things we want to do. One is to, of course, apply the heading style, and we also want to change that to title case because heading text in APA style is always capitalized in title case. And so you can go ahead and do that for each of the additional items and know, okay, well, these headings are telling you more or less exactly what should go in there. Now, with this last section, do you need a separate advocacy for your work heading? Probably not. The conclusion is going to be the shortest section here. Let us recall that when we go look at the rubric, that the conclusion here is only 5 points, which 5 out of 250, that means that it is 150, that's 2% of the grade. So the conclusion won't be that long. It's probably going to be 1 or 2 paragraphs. Let's try and estimate the length of these sections just based on the points allowed. So if you'll recall, 2,800 to 3,000 words is around 11 to 12 pages of body content. Well, what happens if we do the math here and say, okay, well, tenets of the theory are used to appropriately analyze, well, that's 30 points, that's 30 out of 250, and if we divide that, we get 12%. If we multiply that by 12 pages, then we end up with 1.5 pages. So that suggests to me that where it says the introduction to refutation 1 should be 20 points. So if we're, for the tenets of theory 1, that should be around 1.5 pages. And we even have for the next section, the introduction to refutation, that should be 150 to 200 words. And you know what? This is information that was not on the outline given earlier, but it is important because it tells us how long it should be. So you can go ahead and add that here. All right, so introduction to refutation. And I'm just going to highlight that to clarify that that's something that should be ultimately deleted, but it's handy to have here as we are outlining it. Okay, questions so far? We're doing great on time. Okay, so I had a question coming in about uh, this instruction to not include the cover page headings, quotes, or references in your word count. So the quotes is one of those things where it's a little harder to exclude those. So let's talk about the motivation there. Your paper should be ballpark 11 to 12 pages of main content. That's again excluding the title page, excluding the references. What the instructor does not want here is long block quotes to help you meet that page limit. So quotes are used as evidence to support your argument and to provide a catalyst for analyzing and discussing tenets of the theory. And what you do with that, you know, you want to be selective and only use the most relevant information rather than giving us lots and lots of dialogue. So some other tips here. So one thing that some people have trouble with is getting the text of the movie. And this is something where it is helpful to know that you can actually access most of these scripts online for free. And so while you, of course, want to watch the film because there's lots of stuff that is not captured in the script, and sometimes the script that you have online may be different from what was filmed or from what was released in the theaters, it is a helpful starting point. So how do you find that? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. So I'm going to pop open my web browser and let's search for hidden figures and quotation marks and script. And you'll see that we have a number of websites offering this, including ScriptSlug. That's fine. Go ahead and open that up. And if we select read script here, we find that, oh, we have the script here. So if you're trying to remember, well, where was that bathroom scene? Roundabout. You can look for bathroom, just using a word search and see, okay, that's on page 26. And even if you don't know exactly where that is in the film, we can look at this, see roundabout, okay, well, how many pages are in this script? We find 123. So that's somewhere a little bit over 20% of the way in. So you can skip there and then find the timestamp that you're going to use with the quote. Now, I don't know exactly where this is. I don't have the movie queued up. But if we are going to be discussing a particular exchange, well, let's head back to our Word document. And let's say we're going here. And so you can save yourself a little time by pasting in the text and then use keep text only to remove that extra formatting, and then add in our quotation marks. And let's go ahead and take this out so we can format it normally. And then at the end of this, we will put the timestamp, and I'm just going to make this up here because we don't have time to queue up the video. Now, if you're wondering why are we using present tense, I'm glad you asked. So while normally when we're referring to scholarly articles and such, we refer to things said and done in the past using past tense. When dealing with films, and to a certain extent when discussing literature like fiction, novels, and short stories and such, there's a convention, a kind of exception, a convention that we use present tense to describe things that are happening on screen, and that we refer to things that happened before these events that were being discussed using past tense. So, okay, so we've got a notable scene showing the tense of whichever theory we're doing in Hidden Figures comes when Catherine is looking for the bathroom. She respectfully asks Ruth, blah. However, Ruth retorts, blah. And then you write whatever commentary and explanation you have and pick it apart. And there may be another example of this. Another reason to have the copy of the script is you may find that there are certain words that you feel are coming up a lot and you want to know, well, how much is this actually used? So here's an example of a particular word that does tend to catch the attention here. And if we do a search here, I'm just using Command F, Control F if you're on a PC, Command F if you're on a Mac, and you see that, oh, this particular word happens to show up 29 times. If we use white here, that shows up 60, which some of those are going to be in stage directions, some of them are going to be in spoken lines. So keep this in mind, that sometimes this may help show you things because if a theory emphasizes something, and let's look back at some of those theories. If the theory emphasizes something and you can create some empirical sense where you know and understand what's going on, that may help you make more specifics. So let's just say that we were looking at the critical race theory. So critical race theory holds, among other things, that race is an inextricable aspect of things that happen as you go through life, that it's impossible to separate someone's race from how they experience the world. And so if we were to try and apply this here, I'm not saying that you'll agree with this, but if you were trying to apply it here, one thing you might say is, well, uh, something about Ruth's word choices is highlighted by this theory. You might look at how Ruth, who is white, and Catherine, who is not, that choice of word is othering, saying, oh, you're in a different category, which is something that there's a lot of critical race theory that says that's very important. Now, alternately, you might look at one of those other theories and say, well, hold on, well, it's just a particular choice of things. It's not that. This theory shows there's something else. Oh, she's lower class, and that's what they're delving into. That's why she's treated that way. If you're doing with that, you might think that Marxist theory is a good example for understanding what's going on. And they may both be effective, or you might find that another one explains things better to you. This is not necessarily there's one theory that really gets it all, but make sure you cover the pros and the cons. Now, of this pool here, I'm guessing that you'll probably have a couple theories that seem just to speak more to you, that you feel you have more to say with them. And if you're on the fence, I would go around and highlighting the theories on this list first, and then narrow it down. So for example, communication privacy management theory. Could you apply it to this film? Yes, there is bit about managing communications and who gets to speak to who and whatnot. Is it going to give you a lot to talk about, like a page and a half or more? I'd say that's probably less relevant to this than some of the other ones. So think about that, about which ones you have the most to say about. Because if you look at a theory and say, well, it's not, it could go either way, that may mean that you just don't have a lot to say about it, and that's okay. It's the end of the term. Pick something that you can write about, write well, write in detail, and work on that. So we have covered everything that is on my list for the webinar for this evening. I do encourage additional questions. If you think of some after we finish, you can always contact the Writing Center at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. I will stick around if there are any final questions, but otherwise I'll say thank you for attending this webinar. Have a good rest of the evening, and let's bring the semester in strong. Just one more week to go. Have a good evening, everyone.